Matt Johnson.
All right. Thank you, sir. Good morning, Richmond, Virginia. All right. So I'm super stoked to be here today, but before we start, I have to say three things, and then we are all gonna do one, okay? Cool. First thing, Doug, Jolinda, and the entire Creative Mornings crew, thank you so much for having me today. It really is an honor. And beyond that, thank you for doing this. This is such an incredible experience, so really, truly, thank you. Second, I want to look at you in the eyes to let you know how much your presence means to me today. I know the coffee, the conversation, and the donuts don't hurt, but seriously, your time means a lot, and so I'll try and treat it as valuable as I can. Cool? Last, I want to thank two colleagues, Olivia Craig, artist and graphic designer who did all of the visuals today, and then Jamie Glom, who is my partner in crime for all the speaking engagements. So to you ladies, thank you so much. All right, now, collectively, we are gonna do something to get us ready for this, okay? So we're all gonna stand up. Awesome, you guys are so good. All right, we're gonna shut our eyes. All right, shut our eyes. And we're gonna transport ourselves back to 1985. It's the height of the Cold War, and we're standing in the middle of a Soviet Union arena. And we 300 Americans are the only Americans in this space. And we're watching what might be the most important boxing match in world history. Because there's a scrappy kid from Philadelphia who's in the ring, and he's fighting the biggest, baddest man who killed his best friend. And the thing we need to remember is, without us, this guy doesn't win. And all that this country represents doesn't happen, okay? So he needs us right now to say, wait a minute, wait. Did you guys hear it? Rocky, 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 Rocky. He needs us, Rocky, 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 Rocky. Louder! Rocky, 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 Rocky. That's not gonna do it, guys. Come on, more. All right, Rocky. All right, so everything that's great about this country is happening right now. He defeats Ivan Drago, and democracy and human rights reign. Equality spreads across the land, and you know what he says? Do you know what he says? He says, if you can change and I can change, we all can change. And better you and me fight than 20 million, right? Okay, so great, Rocky Balboa. I just screwed the pooch because I am now talking about Rocky IV in a speech about equality, but the reason is that this is what the best version of ourselves is, right? The peaceful, the inspiring, and everything that there is. And we need to look around, we're smiling right now, and we need to look around and hold on tight to this energy, okay? We can sit down, by the way. Hold on tight, because we're about to go on a 20-minute journey through an alternative version of our history. And we're gonna go to some dark places, and we need to make sure that we hold on to this wonderful, amazing energy that we just caused ourselves to save the world and end the Cold War. So congratulations to us. Are you guys ready? Are you gals ready? Awesome, let's do this. And we're going to Bummer Town. All right. I want to talk to you about an idea from which this country was born. It was the fuel for the freedom rides, the strength in the suffrage times, the rage in the railroad strikes, and the pride in the Stonewall riots. It's the idea that no woman, man, trans, immigrant, worker, Muslim, disabled, Jew, queer, vagabond, outcast, or animal is less than. It's equality. So here I am, a white man in the capital of the Confederacy, talking to you about equality. It's true. But know that this is not about me or even this place. It's about us and what we can be. Because we will get there someday. I said, we will get there someday. And it won't just be the words from our mouths. It'll be the blood that runs through our American hearts. Fight your demons. The El Rancho Motel in Sacramento changed at least one man's life. It was January 11th, 1968. The Reverend Floyd Gressett gave a friend an audio tape. It was a song called Greystone Chapel by an inmate at Folsom Prison. The Reverend's friend was Johnny Cash, and Glenn Shirley would never be the same. Glenn Shirley's road to Folsom started in Oklahoma. He was born poor, the son of Dust Bowl cotton farmers. The family migrated to California in the 40s with hopes of better harvests. What they got was a violent son in and out of trouble with the law. Glenn did stints at Chino, Soledad, and San Quentin before finally landing at Folsom for armed robbery. Glenn Shirley had his demons. But Johnny Cash knew when he heard it. He had to play Greystone. The set started with Folsom Prison Blues, and 3,000 prisoners went wild. Glenn Shirley was in the front row, and they were only supposed to play 18 songs, but when the last was over, Johnny looked down in the front row and said, "I hope we do your song justice, Glenn." And everything changed. The song was a hit. Glenn got a record deal and did an album from prison. Then Cash convinced Governor Ronald Reagan to let Shirley out on parole. Johnny and June picked him up at the gates and took him back to Nashville. Glenn got a wife, money, and tour with Johnny Cash. But Glenn struggled to adjust to life on the outside. He turned to drugs and threatened to kill bass player Marshall Grant on tour. Johnny had to ask Glenn to leave. And like that, it was over. Shirley moved back to California to find work at an industrial dairy farm. He fed 10,000 cattle a day and lived in his truck. We may grow older, smarter, or more powerful, but these are just layers on the same fragile hearts. Hearts that carry who we are. Glenn Shirley shot himself at his brother's house on May 11th, 1978. Johnny Cash paid for his funeral. Never stop fighting your demons.
I'd like to take a minute or two here and say thank you, if you don't mind.
Let's walk. The wheelchair broke on July 7th, 2014. Mike Solsona was in the lawn supply aisle of a Lowe's home improvement store. A bolt snapped in the rear wheel and he went down. So Mike sat on the floor, helpless and still. A desperate situation for a guy who knows hard luck all too well. It all started on January 15th, 1971. Mike was walking point for his platoon in unknown jungles just outside Da Nang province in central Vietnam.
When I got there in '70, and
He had a bad feeling, but he kept on walking. He was a good Marine. Mike checked his watch, and it was 10 minutes to 10 p.m., and his foot was on the detonation pin of a landmine. Mike remembers a flash of light and feeling the heat slice through his body. Then everything went black. And when he woke up, his legs were gone. Mike Solsona's first taste of tragedy, but certainly not his last. Mike went on to contract hepatitis C from a blood transfusion in Vietnam, and when he was well enough to return to the States, he was treated badly, a baby killer. Readjusting to civilian life was harder than war, and Mike was lost. The irony is that when you're lost, only you can find yourself. And Mike did in 1978. He was asked to teach actors how to look like they were walking on wooden legs for a new play called 5th of July. And while there, Mike watched playwright Lanford Wilson from a distance. He was fascinated, and that's when he knew that he would be a writer. He's written 23 plays and 15 screenplays since, and with productivity came resilience. So when the van Mike needs to get to his weekly blood checkups was stolen in 2012, he didn't even press charges. He just made do until he got it back. But Mike couldn't just make do on the floor of that hardware store. He literally could not move until 3 employees arrived. They disassembled the chair and replaced nearly every moving part on the spot. And they stayed an hour and 45 minutes late to do it. Mike Solsona found his legs, but sometimes that isn't enough. May we be the legs for those in need. May we walk together. All right, let's shake it out a little bit. Are we bummed? It's getting heavy. It's getting so heavy. But guys, it only gets worse, so let's keep going. All right. The first generation of free black Americans. Alfred Price was born a slave in 1860. It was in Hanover County, just outside Richmond. And despite being born in the capital of the Confederacy just 1 year before the war, Alfred made a remarkable life. He went from slave to free man to blacksmith to stable owner to funeral director. He served on the board of directors for many local businesses and became a selfless advocate for his Jackson Ward neighborhood. Alfred Price deserves a statue. He got a small plot in the Evergreen Cemetery that would soon be overgrown and forgotten. The Evergreen Cemetery dug its first grave in 1891. It was to be the African-American counterpart to the Richmond's Hollywood Cemetery, which houses Jefferson Davis and 2 former presidents, Monroe and Tyler. The 59 acres at Evergreen are now home to some of the most prominent African-Americans of Richmond, including Maggie Walker, the first female bank president in America. The Evergreen Cemetery Association went bankrupt in 1973, and the cemetery fell into disrepair with overgrown paths, upturned monuments, and anonymous graves. Vandals stole bones and caskets from the Braxton Mausoleum, and people dumped tires, couches, and garbage on the graves when the landfill across the street was closed. Conditions got so bad that some dug up and moved their family members. In a country that is keen to never forget, we forgot. We forgot about the first generation of free black Americans in Richmond. Everything they knew, everything they did, and everything they were is slowly fading away under kudzu, trash, and trees. I saw Alfred Price's grave. The inscription on his tombstone read, "He lived for those who loved him." May we do the same. May we never forget. The most interesting Navy SEAL I ever met. I first met Chris Beck in the bureaucracy. He came to my office, grabbed one side of his desk, and said, "Grab the other side, this is all wrong." Shocked, I looked up and asked exactly what the hell he meant. He said that I was in a position of weakness with my side facing the door and that I needed to move my desk to project power. I grabbed the other side and angled the desk towards the door, and a power seat was born. This was the first of many interesting interactions with Chris. He had just retired after 20 years as a Navy SEAL, and with 13 extended deployments, 7 in combat, a Purple Heart, and a Bronze Star, he had a story for every occasion. He told me about taking shrapnel from a Taliban rocket, going undercover as a Pashtun taxi driver in Afghanistan, and finding one of Saddam's gold Kalashnikovs in Basra. But he was more than war stories. Chris spoke with a unique compassion for those around him. I once saw him rip the Purple Heart off of his dress uniform for a young lady he had just met at a holiday party. He asked her to hold on to it to remember his friends who died for the United States of America. Truly an exceptional man. Two years ago, I found out that Chris Beck is now Kristen Beck. After more than 40 years suppressing her sexual identity, Kristen began hormone therapy, laser facial hair removal, and publicly announced her transition. I expected the news to spread quickly in the bureaucracy, and it did. But I didn't expect the huge outpouring of support from former teammates, commanding officers, and assorted coworkers. They supported her not just as a soldier and a patriot, but as a woman. And I was really damn proud to be an American bureaucrat that day. All right, this will be our last story today. To set your body ablaze, and it's a real uplifting one to leave you guys on a good note here. Set your body ablaze in America. Norman Morrison called in sick on November 2nd, 1965. He spent the day with his wife Ann and 3 kids. The family had French onion soup for lunch and talked about vacation plans, a suit that Ann wanted, and other routine things. Norman told his wife that he never felt better or more right. Life was as it should be. That afternoon, he loaded his 1-year-old daughter and wicker picnic basket into a borrowed Cadillac and drove south towards Washington, D.C. He stopped briefly to mail a letter and then arrived at the Pentagon. Norman walked with his baby and picnic basket to a patch of grass just 40 feet below the office's Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara. He set the baby down, grabbed a gallon of kerosene from the basket, poured it over his head, and lit himself on fire. It was the first of 5 self-immolations to protest the Vietnam War. Ann Morrison received a letter 2 days later. It was Norman's last. He told her that he loved her dearly, but he had to help the children of Vietnam. It shook her. And it shook Robert McNamara, too, who later said, "Morrison's death was a tragedy not only for his family, but also for me and this country. It was a country of struggle, a country of rage." On October 14th, 2013, John Constantino walked onto the National Mall and stood in front of the Capitol. He emptied a red gas can on his head, gave a firm military salute, and lit himself on fire. John Constantino died that night. There was no letter, no speech, and no explanation. So while it may have just been one man's end with mental illness, it also could have been a sign that we are once again a country of struggle and a country of rage. But this is more than a story of tragic politics. Because after John set himself on fire, bystanders took off their shirts and ran to extinguish his body. And when they did, John was still conscious. He thanked them. John Constantino's last human emotion was gratitude and not rage. May we never lose sight of the power of our compassion, and may we never let each other burn. Thank you all so much for having me today. And can we all say, we will get there someday. Say it. We will get there someday. Come on. We will get there someday. Okay, thank you all so much for having me today. Thanks, sir.
That was awesome.
Cool, and we can just hang with you. Okay. Okay.